Hey, welcome to ThriveTalk, Northeast Ohio Thrive Magazine's video podcast for people 55 and older. Although if you are younger than 55, you certainly are allowed to listen and watch this. I'm Marie Eliam. I'm editor of Thrive Magazine and the host of today's video podcast. And my guest is someone I'm really excited to talk to, is Michael Olszewski. He is Thrive's pop culture columnist, and he knows a lot about a lot of things in Northeast Ohio and beyond. But he's just fresh off going to a pop culture convention. Is that how you would describe it, in Baltimore?
Yeah, Janice, my wife and I go to a lot of these conventions and we talk about our books. This one was the Mid-Atlantic Nostalgia Convention, and it's really a great opportunity for people to come out and visit with a lot of the people that they grew up with on TV, or who, just to meet them and talk to them. The last one that we were at had Morgan Fairchild, Vicki Lawrence, who played Mama in Mama's Family, Juliette Mills, and Haley Mills, her sister, and so many other people that were there. Mackenzie Phillips, if you'll remember Mackenzie Phillips. In the past, this same show has had people like, they've had a cast reunion of Barney Miller and so many wonderful people. And they come out, and it's great to hear people just exchange just conversations with these stars that they grew up with. And as I might mention this before, the funny thing is, when you see these people on TV and you get your picture taken with them and their autographs and all that sort of thing, you think that they know you. Like they know you from the TV. So they'll come and say, "Hi, what's your name?" "My name's Bill. I used to watch you on Friday nights." Sam's in the hospital. I say, "Oh, that's terrible." And they look around, "Who's Sam?"
Yeah.
But at any rate, it's wonderful. And it's a great way to relive some great times in our past and in our lives, and really kind of look back and say, "Hey, those were fun times." It's a great way to escape. So we go to a lot of these. We go to Monster Bash in Pittsburgh. We go to the Columbus Moving Picture Show in Columbus. And, of course, Mid-Atlantic Nostalgia Show. They've got a bunch of them here. Right now we're in Florida, so they've got a bunch of them down here. But it keeps us busy, that's for sure.
That sounds fun. Well, speaking of pop culture, we could talk about all kinds of subjects because you know a lot about many subjects. But I was interested in picking your brain about the Superman Northeast Ohio connection because the movie that came out this summer, parts of it were filmed here, and people were really invested in this movie. And I know that there is a connection, but I'm not really quite sure what it is. So tell me a little bit about why Superman is important to Northeast Ohio, or vice versa.
Well, it's to be perfectly honest, I can think of no other city, private city, outside of like New York City, where a superhero is so closely connected. Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, a couple of local guys that went to Glenville High, and they were introduced by a guy named Irv Fine. Not Irv Fine, I'm sorry, his brother. And it escapes me how embarrassing it is. It was Irv Fine's brother.
Okay.
that actually introduced them. But they hit it off, and those were the days when, in those early days of pop culture, they had mimeograph machines, those ditto machines with the blue that, by the way, were invented in Cleveland. And they had little magazines. They had a magazine called Science Fiction, and this magazine had a character called the Reign of the Superman, and it was a villain, more like Lex Luthor. But Jerry Siegel and Joe were really into comic strips and science fiction. As a result, they got together, they started knocking around and trying to sell various characters, and some of them were kind of interesting, and there was some interest, and they came up with this idea for Superman. Jerry was living on Kimberly Avenue in Cleveland, and what happened was they came up with Superman. In fact, Jerry, in the middle of the night, came up with it. Couldn't wait to run 3 or 4 blocks down to Joe Shuster's house to introduce it, and he came up with the preliminary sketches. They couldn't sell this character, and it just sat there. And they still had some other characters like Slam Bradley and the Waif and all that sort of thing, and they were making a little bit of money. But in the Depression, every penny counted. Well, as it turns out, they did give it a chance in Action Comics #1, and the character just took off. Now, the interesting thing about this was they used to sit at the Cleveland Library because it was air-cooled in the summer, and they would go back and forth and talk about their many aspirations and heroes and things like that. And what happened was they decided that they were going to try to sell this character, and it was going to be based in Cleveland, and it was based in Cleveland for the first 10 issues. In fact, many of the names and the people that are in them are based on people that they knew, their friends. For example, Lois Lane was based on Lois Amster, even though later on it would come out that actually Jerry's second wife was sort of like the initial model for the drawings. But Lois Amster was somebody that he was kind of sweet on in high school at Glenville High. And then Wilson Hirschfeld is actually the editor of the Cleveland Star, the newspaper. And it's kind of interesting, too, because many of the addresses that they have in the first 10 issues took place in Cleveland. Many of the addresses are addresses of famous places, like they give the address of the Plain Dealer, and it's sort of like an inside joke. After this character really started to take off, and in fact, it was even produced here at the Shuster Studios on East 105th. They got pulled into the office and they said, look, this Superman is just too big for Cleveland. You have to come up with a new name for a city, some sort of metropolis. They said, well, that's a good name, Metropolis. Let's try that. And they said another thing. He works for the Cleveland Star. Well, that was based on the Toronto Star because Joe Shuster was originally from Toronto. And they said, we don't want to get sued by the Toronto Star. You got to come up with a new newspaper name. So they wanted to get it syndicated initially in the Plain Dealer. As legend has it, and no one can really nail this down, supposedly they rearranged the letters in Plain Dealer so it looked like Daily Planet. They added a Y in there. It still makes a great story. At any rate, Superman in Cleveland, took off from Cleveland. Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster were, as Irv Fine, the great Irv Fine, as I keep calling him, a dear friend. He was Jerry Siegel's first cousin. He told me they were tremendously creative guys and terrible businessmen.
Well, that happens a lot. Well, because they were in the publishing business, though, right?
Well, they got into the publishing business, and they basically sold this character for about $150 in perpetuity, meaning, and they were making a lot of money. In fact, this is an amazing thing. They bought very nice houses in University Heights and some of the surrounding areas. Joe Shuster had a fireplace in his living room, and he had a stack of Action Comics #1 next to it. And that's how he would start the fires.
Oh my God.
The last time one came up for auction, it was $4 million. And both of these guys were in very tough financial straits for a long time. They were making good money for their time. However, Jerry went into the military. Joe, unfortunately, had very poor eyesight. He was almost blind. And he couldn't, but when the service called, Jerry, went into the military. In fact, he was inducted at Cleveland Stadium during one of the big events there at Cleveland Stadium, the Festival of Freedom. Bob Hope was the host, and he left the stadium and went to basic training. But when he was with, I believe, Edgar Rice Burroughs, and they worked on their camp newspaper, he found out that they were putting out Superboy without their permission. Ooh. And they came back and they said, this is not right. And because they wanted to expand the franchise, they were in Action Comics, World's Finest Comics. Superman had his own magazine. And, they wanted to expand it a little bit. So that led to some lawsuits. And Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster won the lawsuit. However, the money that they got from DC Comics pretty much all went to the attorney. And then DC said, by the way, we will no longer need your services. They took their names off the strip. And basically, they were just looking for work. They started another comic strip called Funny Man. And it was sort of based on Danny Kaye. And it was a comedian who was a detective. It ran for a year, maybe two. I'd have to look. But it ran for about 2 years. And it just didn't catch on like Superman. But Superman thrived. Meanwhile, these guys were hustling for work.
Wow. Isn't that something? Doesn't it always seem to happen to Cleveland or people in Cleveland? I mean, it really does. It's like, you guys got it started, but we're going to take it from here.
Exactly. And Irv Fine told me, and by the way, his brother's name was Jerry. It just came to me, Jerry Fine. But Irv Fine told me that they were celebrities here because when the Superman cartoons first came out, they actually had it one of the premieres at the Palace Theater, and Jerry and Joe were in the lobby, and you could see them doing their strip there. And it was kind of interesting too because Max Fleischer, one of the cartoons was actually nominated for an Academy Award. And if you see them, they're really remarkably done. They're really for adults. But the amazing thing was Joe went down to Florida to help them, Max Fleischer at the Fleischer Studios with some of the drawings and some of the settings and stuff. And he was sitting. Joe was not a very good dresser, and I'm not sure exactly why, but Joe he grew up poor. I mean, in fact, he learned to draw with gloves on because they couldn't afford heat in his apartment.
Wow.
But what happened was Joe was down there in Florida, and he got arrested for vagrancy. And he says, no, I'm the guy that created Superman. So they bring him up, and he's in front of the judge. He said, honestly, I'm Joe Shuster. I created Superman. They said, yeah, dressed like that. They finally called DC Comics, and they said, that's really him.
Wow.
And they came down and got him. But at any rate, Irv Fine told me that they used to have dances, and he wanted to impress a girl that he was going out with at the time. So they were going to have a celebrity at this dance. He found out it was his cousin, Jerry Siegel. And she seemed far more impressed with Jerry than with Irv. But actually, Irv was the one that kept that going for so many years. And Superman, it was in 1975 when the first Superman movie was just coming out. And Jerry Siegel was looking, wait a minute, they're putting $1 million into this movie. And Marlon Brando is getting paid some outrageous amount of money just for appearing on the screen. And we're struggling here trying to get work. And, they actually, Jerry actually did work for DC for a time, but he was just on hire. He was just paid almost like, by the story. Didn't get his name in any of the stories or anything like that. So what happened was after they were let go from DC and they struggled and they were still picking up work here and there. In fact, I hate to say this, but Joe Shuster actually was in New York City. He moved to Queens. He was living in New York. And he got some work doing illustrations for these under-the-counter magazines. And the funny thing was, they all looked like the characters from Superman. So, those recently came up. In fact, a guy named Craig Yo came out with a book called Secret Identity that showed that part of Joe's life. He was desperate. I mean, they were both desperate. So in 1974, 75, Jerry Siegel starts writing letters to news outlets. And he says, wait a minute. He says, we put a curse on this movie. He said, we're the people that actually developed his character. And now everybody is going to get rich from it. And the guys that, actually created it can't even make a living from it. Well, one thing led to another. Newspapers picked it up. And a guy named Neil Adams helped. Neil Adams, who was later a very prominent, who was a prominent comic strip artist. And they basically went to the public. And they went to DC Comics and they said, we're starting a PR campaign. These guys are living in poverty while Superman's flying around. What are you going to do about it? And they said, all right, look, maybe we can come up with some kind of a solution. What they did was, and it was a far more intricate contract than we know about. They may have even prospered a little bit more than we thought. I hope they did. But what they did was they said, look, in $1975, we'll pay these guys a pension and health benefits. But we're not putting their names on the strip. And Neil Adams says, sorry, that's a deal breaker. You got to put their name on the strip. Well, meanwhile, Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster are saying, wait a minute, how much are we making? $25,000 in $1975. That's a really good pension.
Right,
and for people that did nothing, let's do it. Adams says, trust me. Another guy that came to their aid was a guy named Jerry Robinson, who was one of the originators that helped Bob Kane with Batman. And he said, trust me on this. DC said, okay, we'll put their names on it. I think with Superman, it'll say created by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster. So they were there at Neil Adams' apartment. And actually that night they were watching the CBS News. And they were having a party, to celebrate this. And they announced it. And Walter Cronkite said, and they're going to have their names on the strip. And Joe Shuster broke into tears saying, I didn't think anybody cared. Well, the great thing was when they had a preview of the very first Superman movie with Christopher Reeve. And they were watching the movie. And when the credits come up and it says, created by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, the crowd roared with approval.
Wow.
These guys were just overwhelmed by this. So they actually had a pretty good relationship with DC Comics until, the 90s when they passed away. But still, they always had their roots in Cleveland, and they were always very fond of Cleveland.
Why did DC Comics dig its heels in for so long? Like, what was the big deal about giving credit where credit's due?
Well, what happened was they got sued. When they got sued in 1948, they said, what, you're suing us? No, you can't sue us. And we own this character. What's interesting is that the original check that they got for their 40 pages or whatever it was, in fact, they were so poor when they first sent in the comic strips that they were putting it on wrapping paper, the backs of wrapping paper. And they said, no, you have to transfer this and all that sort of thing. And they did. And they were able to, actually save a lot of the drawings. But anyway, what happened was when they first signed on, signed away the character, they signed, the check was made out to them and they misspelled Joe Shuster's name. And they put Schuster, was SHU. So he signed it twice. Jerry Siegel signed it twice. I think maybe 10, 15 years ago, somebody was looking through a drawer at DC Comics and they found the canceled check. Well, this is like a relic for comic book collectors. So they put it up for auction, and it was $150,000.
Wow.
And just very few drawings and very few original drawings exist. I think there's one that still exists where basically it says it was just a little panel from the very first story, and it's Superman, and it labels him as Superman. That one little panel went for $250,000.
Are you aware of any Superman memorabilia from that time that ever shows up in Cleveland? I love to go to estate sales, and I'm thinking maybe it'll be in a box somewhere that I'll pull out. I mean,
glad you brought that up. About 6 or 7 years ago, the Cleveland Public Library decided that they were going to put on an exhibit of, because celebrating Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, that they met there and all that sort of thing. What happened was, and I was so honored to be a part of this, this committee, they basically turned the library into a Superman museum. Now, this is the interesting point. We had original artwork from Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster. We had films of the 1939 Macy's Parade with the first Superman balloon. We had personal home movies. We had memorabilia. There was a guy that actually he does the Dick Tracy comic strip, and he had a huge collection of Superman memorabilia, donated it to the library. As I had a collection myself that I donated as well. And it's got all kinds of wonderful stuff. The Cleveland Public Library has probably the largest public collection of Superman memorabilia. You can go and see it. Now, here's the interesting thing. You had yearbooks signed, Glenville yearbooks signed by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster. You had all this wonderful memorabilia. You had the very first Superman toy, the Superman dolls and stuff like that. There was one exhibit, and it went through 3 floors. There was one item that nobody knew what it was, and we even had uniforms from the costumes from the movies, actual props from the movies. We had a painting of Superman that hung in the editor's or the publisher's office, first time out of New York City. Everybody thought this is great. People were coming from all over the country, but young people were coming up and saying, "What is this thing?" We had to put up an actual sign explaining what a phone booth was. It was a wooden phone booth. Nobody had ever seen one.
That's funny. That's great.
And I was amazed by this. And then somebody told me, you're dealing with a generation that doesn't know what a dial tone is.
Yeah, right.
And the funniest thing was, you had crowds were coming out, but there was always a line to get your picture taken inside a phone booth, a wooden phone booth.
That's funny.
And of course, we had to explain that that's where Superman would often change. Sure. Here's the thing, though, and thank goodness, Irv Fein's vision for a Superman, the late Irv Fein, the late great Irv Fein, the Superman statue is finally here, and David Deming was the sculptor. But 40 years ago, in 1986 through 1988, another group had an idea for a statue. A statue had been talked about for 50, 60 years. Uh-huh. And in 1988, a group called Never Ending Battle had an idea. They wanted to put up a statue and start a Superman museum. Well, their intentions were great. And they put on a Superman exposition. I mean, it was a huge convention in downtown Cleveland, a great parade. Everybody was contributing. All these people were volunteering. And unfortunately, they never asked any of the Siegel family to actually help out. They would have helped. And the 2 guys that were promoting it really didn't have the experience. And unfortunately, it went down in failure. And that delayed it for many years. But here's something that's kind of interesting. And this is going to be maybe a scoop for you, Marie. Here you go. One of the things that they were talking about doing, and they would have done this if Never Ending Battle would have continued, was to fund a statue. They wanted to come out with a special Superman comic book, where he returned to Cleveland. Now, if you look, you see the Terminal Tower?
Yeah,
neat. What happened was this alien here, the storyline is an alien comes to Cleveland, and they're all coming to Cleveland for to celebrate the anniversary of the Cleveland Star newspaper, which appeared in action with #1, Superman, Perry White, and everybody. Perry White, by the way, was based on Wilson Hirschfeld, who later became the editor of the Plain Dealer. But at any rate, they come here, and a flying saucer lands in the flats, and it becomes a Superman museum. And people come in, but they don't come out. It's a portal to another dimension, and Superman has to save it, and get this portal out of Cleveland. But they all had great ideas, and luckily, the Cleveland Convention Center actually stepped forward and played a major role in helping get the new statue there. But did you see the movie?
You know what? I did not see the movie. Did you?
Yes. And here's the thing. This is the amazing thing. And it's great because Cleveland really, the two stars of the movie are Cleveland and Crypto, the super dog. I mean, Crypto steals the show. Here's the other thing about this was, I have to warn you, if you haven't seen the movie, you have to really kind of concentrate on it. Maybe you see it a second time because you're saying, oh, look, there's the arcade and there's the theater building and stuff like that. So, and Cleveland, oddly enough, is very amenable to having movies here. The great thing is, remember we had the Avengers movie here and Captain America and so many other movies that were filmed here. So, or in Cleveland. It's just, you have to look at it twice because the first time you're going to be distracted because you're going to say, wait a minute, I was just down that street. Spider-Man was also filmed in Cleveland, if you remember. So it's really exciting. But I think you'll like the movie. But like I said, as soon as they put a dog in it, I said, oh, no, come on. It's going to be, Crypto steals the show.
Yeah.
He's like Yoda.
Right.
He just takes over.
So I appreciate your background and knowledge on the Superman Cleveland connection, because I know it's there, but you connected a lot of the pieces for me and for the readers, and I think that's interesting. So your recommendations, if someone wants to do a Cleveland Superman tour, what should they do?
Here's what you do. Great thing. I'm glad you brought this up too. Go during the day because I am not any urban area at night. Any urban area is you're just not going to get the same effect, and I just don't like traveling at night. And right now we're in Florida. I don't go to Jacksonville at night, and Jacksonville's a wonderful town, but if you don't know the streets or anything like that, you get lost. You're just all kinds of problems. However, my suggestion is this, and this actually started years ago. Jerry Siegel's house, the house that he created Superman in, the bedroom that he created Superman in, is on Kimberly Avenue. It's in the Glenville area. Okay. And we got together with a group called actually the Siegel and Shuster Society, and with the vision of Jerry's cousin Irv Fine and some other folks, we decided, you know what, the place where Twinkies was invented has a commemorative plaque, but the place where Superman was invented is nowhere to be seen. So we actually went to the owners of the house, and Hattie and Jefferson are their names. They're just terrific. And we told them, hey, something happened in this house years ago. And they said, really? Because we thought we got taken for this house. And they said, well, it's where Superman. And Jefferson said, you got to be kidding. I used to read those comic strips. And every house in that area, it's old. It's an old house and needs a lot of work. Every house in that neighborhood does. At any rate, we said what we'd like to do is we would like to, and let me just point this out too. Before we actually get to this point, people used to stand in front of the house. From all over the world they would come. One day, and he said that he'd look out there and say, why are people taking pictures of themselves in front of our house? They never had. So one day he looks and there's some Asian folks looking in through his window, and he said, that's it. My gosh. He comes on and he says, look, I don't mind you taking pictures of my house, but why are you taking pictures of my house? Yeah. And they told him, he said, you're kidding. So he actually did know that, that Jerry lived there. Well, with the help of, I have to tip my hat to the author, Brad Meltzer. Brad found out what was happening, and he said, let me help to raise money. Let's fix this house up. So I didn't think, he said, we're going to have an auction of some things, and let's see what we come up with. Nobody thought we were going to come up with, that he was going to come up with $150,000 overnight. Because all these people were giving original art and scripts and things like that, and there was a great auction. So what happened was we had a great event. We fixed up the house and put up a commemorative fence in front of the house with the traditional S, which was a triangle, saying this is where it all happened. The great thing was, when that happened in 1997, what happened was we were there, and there was a comic book convention in town. So we had the opening ceremonies there on the porch. We had members of Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster's family. But if you looked out in the crowd, you saw people from the cast of Smallville, the woman that played Supergirl, like that. And it was wonderful. So we had this great ceremony and the speeches and all that sort of thing. All of a sudden, torrential rain comes down. And Jefferson comes up to the microphone and he says, I don't know how many of you can fit in this house or can get on this porch, but get in the rain. So they turned it into like a big party inside the house. And as you're going up to see Jerry Siegel's bedroom, which they turned into a mini museum, by the way, you bump into somebody and say, oh, I'm sorry. Oh, that's Sam Witwer, the actor,
Oh my gosh.
But it was just wonderful.
Generous.
And, so that's there, that's there on Kimberly Avenue. And
it's just on Kimberly. You don't know
it's off East 105th.
Okay.
So it's in the Glenville area, but put it in GPS, put it in your Google Maps. Okay. Now, a few blocks down is the street where Joe Shuster, Avon, where Joe Shuster actually had his apartment building, which is gone now, but there is a commemorative fence with the first 10 pages of the first Superman story there.
Oh, cool.
So you can see that. Also, you'll want to see the Ohio Bell building, which many people think was the original place for the Daily Planet. And just any number of people or any number of places around Cleveland. Look at the first issues of Superman, and those are even online, the first stories, and look at the addresses, and you can go there.
Okay.
But it's, in fact, Jerry Siegel later moved to University Heights, and he had a beautiful home there. And the funny thing was, people said that's where Superman lived, and he actually had a Superman costume in his closet. And he would say, well, he's not here right now, but, we do have his laundry.
So people should also go to the Cleveland Public Library.
Absolutely. And you can look at all of the wonderful stuff they have, and they'll show you all the wonderful things they have. And you can actually, you can handle some of the things. They've got some real relics there. And I think that, they'll keep a pretty close eye on you too.
Yeah, right. And then the statue is at the convention center.
Yeah, it's at the Siegel and Schuster Plaza there. So, okay. But I think that the great thing is that we're all celebrating Superman, and we should, because they said that there are very few characters known the worldwide. There's Sherlock Holmes, Robin Hood, and Superman.
Yeah.
They're known in every country. And years ago, when we had the Superman exposition, somebody actually had a mustard can from Nepal with Superman on it. So he's everywhere.
He is everywhere. Gosh, Mike, I want to thank you for your time today, and especially for all of your knowledge that just kind of spills out, which is very impressive, that you can remember dates and time, all of that. And excuse me. And I want to tell our listeners and our viewers that you can access this on YouTube, on our Thrive's YouTube channel, also wherever you find your favorite podcasts for Thrive, Northeast Ohio Thrive magazine. And I'll have links to it and Mike's bio and contact information on our website. And that's also where you can pick up the video podcast. And that's northeastohiothrive.com. And let's see what else. Let me see what else I'm supposed to say here. I'm supposed to say some other things here. Let's see. Oh, also, if you have a topic, anybody has a topic, excuse me, I cannot shake this little cold. If anyone has a topic or a speaker that they'd like us to interview, email me at editor@northeastohiothrive.com.
One thing I would like to mention too, Superman is really a part of Cleveland, and he's everybody's hero, but he should be shared with everybody. And there are a lot of people out there. I mean, comic books are big business. Okay. My suggestion is, if you have any kind of Superman memorabilia or Siegel and Schuster memorabilia, please go to the Cleveland Public Library. Special collections. It'll be preserved forever and available to everyone.
Oh, good suggestion. That's a good suggestion. Because I bet there are things out here in Northeast Ohio that people have that they're not really sure what to do with, or they're just moldering on a shelf somewhere. And
yeah, and a lot of times, people will come in, and there are profiteers out there, as there are with everything. Yeah, I mean,
sure.
Really, especially with antiques. And my suggestion would be go to the special collections at the Cleveland Public Library. They'll give it a great home. You even get a tax break. And actually, they'll, when you give it, we were able to get a lot of memorabilia in there, and they've got as I said, the largest public collection of Superman memorabilia, and let's keep it growing too.
Isn't that wonderful? I wish every time I watch Antiques Roadshow, I think maybe there's something around this house that's valuable. And frankly, there's nothing. We have nothing.
Oh, I would probably disagree. I was just looking over the years when I was working in radio, when the authors would come by, I'd have them sign books for me.
Oh,
So
there you go.
Stephen King, Tom Wolfe, all those guys. Thank you.
There you go. Yeah, thank you.
And people will come up to you and say, well, do you know what that's worth? Yes, it's worth everything and nothing because I'm not getting rid of it. It's mine. And I'm going to give it to somebody. I'm not selling it. They'll say it's worth, how much is it worth? $1 million to me. That's what it's worth.
That's right. I'm keeping it.
There you go.
Hey, Mike, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it. It was great talking to you and seeing you too.
Well, anytime I get to talk to you, I'm going to take that opportunity. So everybody, enjoy Thrive. And I always enjoy talking to you too, Marie.
Thanks, friend. All right. Stay in touch. Bye.